multiple Penguins updates, including injury updates following a nasty hit on Matt Grzelcyk yesterday, and Bryan Rust missing his second consecutive game following his expected return from IR, as well as the Erik Karlsson dilemma. The Karlsson conundrum is what I like to call it. It continues to rear its ugly head, and we have to continue to talk about it on this episode of Penguins Digest. So injury updates, Matt Grzelcyk, Bryan Rust, and then we're going to talk about EK65 for a little bit towards the end of the video. But first, before we get into today's episode, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. Penguins Digest, keep spamming that sub button and join our Pittsburgh Penguins community. Let's go Pens, and we will continue to provide daily Pittsburgh Penguins updates on news, rumors, analysis, including injury updates such as today. We're going to dive into what I have found regarding a couple players that are very important to the Penguins' success. And the problem is, I looked for injury updates, but I found a whole lot of nothing. So injury updates or lack thereof is what we're going to talk about today. It becomes a little bit more difficult when the team has a scheduled day off and they don't practice in the morning, because then we don't really know who's on the ice, who's on the alternative rink trying to do some non-contact stuff, who's in the conditioning room, who's in the weight room. We don't know those kind of things. So because there was no practice today, a scheduled day off after the back-to-back, there's not a whole lot to talk about regarding the injuries to Penguins players, but we can still at least dive into the most recent reports on these key players, including Bryan Rust. And the initial report on Rust was that he was going to return on Saturday. Rust was supposed to play both games this weekend for the Penguins. He was initially expected to return from IR because he had gotten past his initial injury that was an undisclosed injury, but now he's suffering from an illness, and that is a completely different injury than we initially had Rust listed at. But they said, no, we're not activating him yet because he has an illness, and we're just going to let him get to 100% before bringing him back to the lineup. So he was initially expected to return on Saturday, didn't. So then he was expected to return on Sunday, didn't. And now we have the most recent update on Bryan Rust that he was still sidelined for the game yesterday against the New York Rangers. It is an illness, so a completely different injury. That is the part that I want to emphasize here with Bryan Rust. He is past the injury that had him on IR. He is now with a different injury, which is an illness, which is expected to just be day-to-day. So we're not expecting Rust to miss a whole lot more time, and his production is something that we can't really replicate with anybody else on this roster. He's one of the most important players on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the stats speak for themselves with Bryan Rust. He's a 20-goal scorer again this season, a model of consistency for the Pittsburgh Penguins over the years, playing on the first line with Sidney Crosby, obviously a very important piece on the power play as well, can kill penalties. He does a little bit of everything for this Penguins team, arguably one of our most important players. So not having him in the lineup really hurts, but knowing that it's just going to be day-to-day, knowing that he should be back hopefully tomorrow against the Flyers, barring any unforeseen circumstances, is definitely good news for Bryan Rust. So we're not sure the extent of the illness. Again, I've been looking for these reports, trying to figure out something. Can't find a whole lot on Bryan Rust. All we do know is that it's an illness. It's a different injury than the one he was originally on the IR for, and he is day-to-day. So we're expecting a return for Bryan Rust hopefully tomorrow against the Philadelphia Flyers. As we move into our next bit of information, which is Matt Grzelcyk. And Matt Grzelcyk got absolutely laid out yesterday by Matt Rempe, a very illegal hit that people continue to argue with me about and say that it was legal. It wasn't legal, and we can just move on after I say that. Matt Grzelcyk is hurt. The Penguins ran 5D for pretty much the entire game yesterday after Grzelcyk was hurt in the 14th minute of the game. Rempe was assessed a minor penalty for the incident, and Matt Grzelcyk was left laying on the ice. We had a commercial break immediately after that. He was taken directly to the locker room and evaluated, and we're still waiting on a word of how serious this injury is for Matt Grzelcyk. We did find out very soon after he got hit that he would not return to the game, and I think that was a foregone conclusion based on the way he reacted to the hit and based on the intensity of the actual hit. So Grzelcyk did not come back into the game, and then obviously this is the most recent report, which actually just got reported a little bit before I started making this video. Penguins defenseman Matt Grzelcyk sustained an injury in the loss Sunday evening, and obviously Matt Grzelcyk is a big piece on defense for the Penguins. Looking at how he would be replaced on the back end, we're looking at Vladislav Kolyachonok, who is a guy that we brought in off waivers from Utah, or Vincent Desharnais maybe taking his spot in the lineup. Desharnais has been getting pretty consistent playing time. He wasn't out there yesterday, yesterday, but he has been getting consistent playing time since coming over in the trade with Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. So we do have some defensemen to work around with. We also have guys like Nathan Clerman in the AHL that could be recalled if Grzelcyk is going to require an IR stint. We will obviously keep you updated if that is to happen, and you guys will be the first to know here on Penguins Digest. Everything that I hear, I'm going to let you guys know, and we're going to hear from Erik Karlsson here in just a second. Let's look at what Karlsson had to say after they asked him what it was like playing with just 5 defensemen yesterday after the injury to Matt Grzelcyk, and just an overall assessment of how that game went for the Penguins. And Karlsson said, that's the game sometimes. We played a good game, then we didn't end up winning. They scored more goals than us, so you see, that's what it comes down to. And you're going to have games where you're not playing your best and you win, and then sometimes you play your almost best and you don't win. This is one of those games. So voicing his frustration, Erik Karlsson understanding that the Penguins really should have won that game yesterday. They played well enough to win, and playing with 5D, he didn't really make any excuses. He just got down to the blunt truth, and that is they played well enough to win. They didn't win, and it's just the luck of the bounce sometimes. That's the way the puck bounces, and Erik Karlsson obviously trying to brush that off. But what continues to come up when Karlsson's name is brought up is these trade rumors with Erik Karlsson. Penguins fans, including myself, are ready to just unload this guy because there's so much positive to his game, but there's a lot more negative to his game. And the negative outweighs the positive in this scenario because Erik Karlsson, every time he puts on a Penguins uniform, it's the difference between Superman and Clark Kent. He is Clark Kent for the Penguins. He is not Superman. And anywhere else that he plays, he seems to be Superman. So it's back to this Karlsson conundrum that this guy continues to underwhelm us when he's wearing a Penguins uniform. And we don't know what to do with him. Do we trade him away? Do we try to just get some value back from a guy that we give up a good bit to get? And a good bit is maybe a stretch because we really didn't give up a whole lot. Just a bunch of random pieces going a bunch of different ways to make that deal work in the first place. But Erik Karlsson, he's a good player when he wants to be, when he's motivated. And he hasn't been motivated for the Penguins. He has not played these meaningful games that he desperately wants to play like he did in the Four Nations face-off where he played exceptional. So it's time to trade Erik Karlsson. This is a report from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Dan Kingerski said it's time to trade Erik Karlsson. I'm not going to dive super deep into the article, but I will show you the end of the article because he says, okay, the deadline is March 7th. A wide open Stanley Cup playoff bracket awaits an aggressive team. So the Penguins should try every effort to free up cap space and take another step towards the next era of Penguins hockey. Perhaps maybe accelerate this retooling process. It's time to trade Erik Karlsson. And I really couldn't agree more. It's a very difficult situation that the Penguins are in with Erik Karlsson. He's the most interesting player on this roster because of his contract, because of his inconsistent play, and it might just be time to get rid of this guy. I mean, we've been saying that for a while, but now it really does feel like the case. And when Mike Sullivan was asked about this, he said about Karlsson's game, for me, aggressive is probably the wrong word. We want him to take what the game gives him. We want him to drive offense, but he's got to do it the right way. He also has to defend because it's hard to win if you don't, you know? When Carl plays a spirited game and competes on both sides of the puck, he is a difference maker. And he absolutely is a difference maker when he does that, but he doesn't do that very often for the Penguins. Sullivan likes these defensemen that are going to play a two-way game, and Erik Karlsson does not play a two-way game. He's a very much one-sided, one-dimensional type defenseman that is a liability on the defensive end, and he has been linked to the Dallas Stars in recent reports. So this is a little teaser for next video when we talk a little bit more about Erik Karlsson. He has been linked to the Dallas Stars. We did a video very recently about Karlsson being linked to the Florida Panthers, and now as of today, he's also linked to the Dallas Stars, who desperately need a defenseman in the absence of Miro Heiskanen. So I think he could go to Dallas. I think he might be a great fit in Dallas. Head coach of Dallas, Peter DeBoer, also coached Erik Karlsson in San Jose, so there's kind of a link there. A bunch of different teams would be interested in Karlsson, and you guys can say that they're not going to give up a whole lot, but it's the name value that Erik Karlsson brings to the table. A lot of teams might be convinced that, yes, they can get him for a lot lower than, market value because of the way that he's played for the Penguins, but at the same time, they expect him to be at least some version of that Norris Trophy winning self. And so for Erik Karlsson, maybe a change of scenery is what he needs. He's never been comfortable in Pittsburgh. We'll dive into that more in the next video. But thank you guys for watching this episode of Penguins Digest. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next episode.